All right, today we are digging into a real classic from Ghana's legal history. This case has it all. We're talking high-level corruption allegations, a super powerful state commission, and a courtroom battle that, well, it ended in a way nobody saw coming. Let's get into the Republic versus Bossman and others.
At the heart of this story were the findings from this massive commission looking into corruption around import licenses. Honestly, on paper, it looked like a total slam dunk for the prosecution. So how did it all go so spectacularly wrong?
So this is the central mystery we're trying to piece together today. You've got this powerful government commission, right? They point the finger. They lay out what seems like rock-solid, damning evidence, and they make these official findings against a few key people. But then, the moment it hits the courtroom, it just unravels. How on earth does that happen?
To really get why the final verdict was such a bombshell, you have to understand the sheer power of the investigation that kicked this whole thing off. And that was the famous All-Anew Commission, set up specifically to root out corruption in how import licenses were being handed out.
So what made this particular commission so feared? It all came down to a pretty unique law called Act 230. Now, this law meant that the commission's findings weren't just, suggestions. No way. They were automatically treated as prima facie evidence in court. And what that means essentially is that the legal script got flipped on its head. The accused didn't walk in with the presumption of innocence. Instead, they had to prove they were innocent. The burden was completely on them. That's a huge deal.
Okay, so who was in the hot seat and what were they accused of? You had Dr. Bossman and a Mr. Stokes charged with conspiring with the Minister of Trade himself to shake down a guy for a 10% commission on an import license. Then Dr. Bossman was also charged, this time with a Mr. Binder, for willful oppression, basically for pulling strings to get an improperly huge license. With the commission's findings backing it all up, this looked like a done deal.
But this is where things get interesting. The case started to fall apart almost right away. Let's look at that first charge, the conspiracy to extort.
The prosecution rolled out their star witness, a man named Maurice Salmon. He was the one who allegedly paid the bribe. Now, the money itself went to the second accused, Stokes, but when the prosecution asked how Dr. Bossman was involved, Salmon could only say what Stokes had told him. This testimony, this one sentence, was pretty much the entire case against Dr. Bossman.
And right there, that's the exact moment the prosecution's case slams into a legal brick wall. You see, Salmon's crucial testimony wasn't something he knew himself. It wasn't something he saw Bossman do or heard Bossman say. It was just him repeating what someone else told him. And in the world of law, that's called
hearsay. And the big problem with hearsay all comes down to fairness. Think about it. Dr. Bossman's lawyers couldn't challenge the original statement because the person who supposedly made it, Stokes, wasn't the one on the witness stand. You can't cross-examine a rumor. The court saw this as incredibly shaky ground to build a conviction on.
Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't there an exception for conspiracies? And you'd be right, there is. You can use what one conspirator says against another. But, and this is a massive but, you first have to prove that a conspiracy even existed using separate, independent evidence. And in this case, the prosecution had zip. Nada. No letters, no other witnesses, absolutely nothing to tie Dr. Bossman to any kind of plan.
And if the legal problems weren't enough, the prosecution story had a serious math problem. Salmon said he was told to pay a 10% commission on a license worth £29,000. Okay, do the math. That's £2,900. But he testified that he actually paid £3,900. That's £1,000 more. And this huge discrepancy, the prosecution never even tried to explain it. It just made their star witness's story look even more unreliable.
So here's the bottom line. With no solid evidence against Dr. Bossman or the minister, the conspiracy charge against them just crumbles. But wait, you might ask, what about Stokes? He's the guy who actually took the money. Well, here's a fun legal fact. You literally cannot be guilty of conspiring all by yourself. It takes two to tango, right? The charge was conspiracy, and since his supposed partners in crime were acquitted, the charge against Stokes just evaporated. He had to be let go too.
So that's one charge down. But what about the other one? The charge of willful oppression against Dr. Bossman and Mr. Binder. Well, that one had an even bigger, more fundamental problem. It was like a chain with a crucial link just gone.
The prosecution laid out a pretty simple theory. It went like this. Mr. Binder, the guy who wanted the license, goes to a man named Kwesi Mold. Mold happens to be buddies with Dr. Bossman, so he asks Bossman for a favor. Then Bossman, who's friends with the minister, makes the final request. A clean, simple chain of influence, right?
Not so fast. That chain was broken right in the middle. Kwesi Mold, the guy connecting Binder to Bossman, was what we call a material witness. He was absolutely essential to the story. And yet, the Olanu Commission never even called him to testify. They just skipped right over him.
And the trial judge, Justice Amisa, saw this as a complete deal-breaker. He basically said, look, by not calling this incredibly important witness, you've undermined the validity of your entire finding on this issue. You can't just ignore the central figure in the story and then blame everyone else based on his supposed actions.
And this whole situation led to a really important legal ruling. In any normal criminal trial, the prosecution has a duty to call all its important witnesses. The court said, hey, if a commission of inquiry wants its findings to carry the weight of real evidence in a courtroom, then it has to play by the same rules. It's a matter of basic fairness.
So, with the first charge tossed out because of hearsay and the second charge completely invalidated because of a massive procedural error, well, there really wasn't much of a case left for the state to argue.
The final decision was, at this point, pretty much a foregone conclusion. The court acquitted and discharged every single one of the accused men on every single charge. What started as a huge public scandal based on a commission's report ended in a quiet, total victory for the defense.
So, what did we learn from all this? The Bossman case really etched some critical principles into Ghanaian law. It hammered home that to prove conspiracy, you need actual, independent evidence, not just whispers and hearsay. It reaffirmed the simple logic that you can't have a one-person conspiracy. And maybe most importantly, it put a major check on the power of state commissions, saying if you want your findings to stand up in court, you have to follow the rules of the court.
And all this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. Looking at this outcome, some people might say the accused got off on a technicality, that they found a loophole. But others would argue that rigorously protecting legal procedure, the rules against hearsay, the duty to call witnesses, isn't a loophole at all. They'd say it's the very core of justice, the thing that protects all of us from the state becoming too powerful. So I'll leave you with that. Was this a legal loophole, or was this justice at its absolute finest?